Hashem, today's daf yomi is the daf yomi for Shabbos Kodesh, and we're going to start the daf on the bottom of Chaf Gimel Amud Beis. On the bottom of Chaf Gimel Amud Beis. So the Gemara says around 9 lines from the bottom, and today's daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim itself for the Shvuyim. And Yeshua for Am Yisrael, the Gemara says that Tani Shila, that Shila said, what's the reason why Rabbi Eliezer says you're not allowed to buy a red heifer from an idolater? My time under Rabbi Eliezer, what's the reason? The reason is the Be'er B'nai Yisrael v'yichlu. Says the children of Israel should speak to the children of Israel and tell them to take a parah aduma, which means B'nai Yisrael yichlu yakichu. Rashi says that you have to purchase the red heifer only from a Jew, but not from an idolater. And so says the Gemara, oh, that's the case, El Me'ata. What about the items from the Mishkan in general? It says also the word v'yichu. Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yichu li'truma. Hachinami b'nei Yisrael yakichu ve'enov v'kochavim yakichu. Doesn't mean also and you're only allowed to take things for the Mishkan from the idolater, from a Jew and not from an idolater. Is that really the case? And once they said, Shalu et Rabbi Eliezer ad Heichon Kibud Avaim, and once they asked Rabbi Eliezer, and they said, to what degree you have to honor your father and your mother? And Rabbi Eliezer responded, see what this one idolater did for his father in Ashkelon. Vidama ben Nesina Shmo. His name was Dama ben Nesina. They one time they wanted to buy, we're on the top of 24a, they wanted to buy stones from him for the ephod, for the Kohen Gadol. Shishim Ribo Ischar, and it cost 60,000 coins. He says 80,000. And the keys to the treasury were underneath Dama Menachina's father's head. And he did not disturb him. So anyway, he didn't disturb him. So we see from here that's how you honor your father and your mother. You don't disturb them if you don't think unless they want to be disturbed. And anyway, we see from here that they were going to buy the stones from an idolater, the stones for the temple. The Gemara says, well, that's a special exception because Avnei Shoam Hifsika Inyan, because it says in the pasuk everything is with a vav. It says, but it doesn't say Va'avnei Shoam. It says V'ketzav and Choshes Tchelas Argaman, and then it says Avnei Shoam. And so we see from here, and Avnei Shoam, you're allowed to buy from the idolaters. Mar says, but then it goes back and says, and the miluim stones. Mar says, well, after that, they went back and said the prohibition applies again. And furthermore, in general, they how can you say you can't buy anything? You can't buy the red heifer from an idolater, but the next clause of that price states, Lashana Haba, that the next Lashana Charis, another year, Noldo Paraduma. That Dam ben Nesina had a red heifer born into his flock bedroom. The sages of Israel entered to see him. Amrlam, he said to them, I know about you, Shem, ani mevakesh mikem kol mamon shebaolam, that if I request all the money in the world for you to pay for my paraduma, then nosnin, you would give atem nosnin, you would give it to me. Achshav eini mevakesh mikem also mamon she'esfarati b'shvil Abba. I only want to make up for the difference that when I lost because I didn't do that deal with you because I didn't want to wake my father. And anyway, we see from here that they were willing to accept this red heifer from this idolater. And Gemara says, no, they weren't going to get it straight from him. Hasam, Tagir Yisrael, they Tagir Yisrael Zaban, that they were going to buy it through a Jewish merchant who was going to be a middleman who was going to buy it and then sell it to them. So we see from here that Rabbi Eliezer says that you can't buy it from an idolater, you can't buy the red heifer from the idolater. According to this theory, that the reason why you can't buy it is because of the prohibition of v'yichu, which he reads as yakichu, and not because he's concerned for the fact that the animal could be sodomized. But Rabbi Eliezer will chayes or the Gemara says, do you really want to take that position? Rabbi Eliezer is not concerned about sodomizing the animal. Matanya Amrulo, they said to Rabbi Eliezer, the Chum said to Rabbi Eliezer, there was once a person and they bought it from the idolaters, and his name was Dama. Va'amri La, and some say Remet Shmuel, and some say it was a different story. His name was Remet. And so this proves you're allowed to buy from the idolaters. Amalei Rabbi Eliezer, Misham Raya, Yisrael, no, there the Jews were watching it from the moment it was born. And so we see from here that Rabbi Eliezer says they were watching it from the moment it was born to make sure that the animal didn't engage in intercourse with the owners. So we see Rabbi Eliezer is concerned about intercourse with the owners. Gemara says Rabbi Eliezer tarti Yisrael kicha v'chayish tamim revia. They know Rabbi Eliezer was in fact worried about both things. He was worried about kicha and revia. He was worried about the fact that the Torah says you can't buy from the idolaters, and also that there's a prohibition against intercourse. That you are concerned that the idolaters would have intercourse with the animals. So he says, Amar Mar Yisrael Mishamon Mishashanolda. Says that in that case, the Jews were watching the red heifer from the time it was born to make sure it didn't have intercourse. And Gemara says, well, that wouldn't be enough. They should have been watching the mother from the moment it was pregnant, because the Amarava Vlada no Gachas Asar he Uvada, because Rava himself taught that if there was a cow that an ox that gored a Jew when it was pregnant and then it dies, its offspring is disqualified for a carbon. Not only is it disqualified, but also the offspring who was pregnant at the time. So nearbo, and if that ox was engaged in intercourse with a human, nearbo, then vada nearbas also heal vada. So, and if the animal was engaged in intercourse, then both it and the offspring, the mother and the offspring, will be prohibited. So the Gemara says, no, Ema Yisrael, no, you have to say that the Jews were watching this animal to make sure it didn't have intercourse or didn't gore anybody from the moment it was conceived. But we still have to be concerned. Maybe they had intercourse with the mother initially before it became pregnant. And because we learned to Mishnah and Tamura, anything that's disqualified to be brought as a korban, for example, if it had intercourse, Vladosein Mutarin, their offspring will be permitted. Vitania Rabbi Eliezer says it's anyways prohibited them. So how could Rabbi Eliezer say they were watching and that would be sufficient? It only works according to Rava, because Rava says that Rav Nachman said the dispute is only if that Rabbi Eliezer prohibits it if it had intercourse after it was sanctified. But if they had the intercourse when it was not yet sanctified, according to everybody, would be permitted. Who says the dispute is even when they were not yet sanctified. But when they were sanctified, according to everybody, it's prohibited. How would he explain it? Meaning to say, how could they buy this paraduma from Dama ben Nesina? According to Rabbi Eliezer, we have to concern that maybe the mother had intercourse before it became pregnant and became disqualified. Mar says, no, must be that they were watching the mother from the time that the mother was conceived. The Gemara says, maybe the grandmother had intercourse. The grandmother ox. No, the Gemara says no. We don't have to be concerned to that degree. We don't have to be concerned for 2 generations of the intercourse. Amar Mar Yisrael Mishamar. So the Jews were watching it from the time that it was created. And how do we know that? How do they know that in the future a red heifer will be born from this union, and it will be red? And you have to watch the mother and make sure that she didn't engage in intercourse with a human. Amar Kahana. They were basically breeding it. They used to bring this red cup in front of it, and when it was engaged in mating, and so therefore, since it had this red cup, the offspring would also be red. If it's so simple to make a red heifer, why is it so expensive? Says whole shtei saras psul as well. And yeah, you can make it red, but you wouldn't make it completely red because just two dark hairs would disqualify. So the Gemara says, and if that's the case, why do they do this specifically with Dam Ben Nesina, now with a Jew? Because Dam Ben Nesina had families of red cows several times that they were born doing it in this manner. And so therefore they had an assumption that they'd be able to breed it like this. But the other cows, even if you brought the red cow in front of it, it wasn't really a certainty you're going to get a red cow. Yosef Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Akila de Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha sat on the porch of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Pasach Aminav Amar. So one of them opened up his mouth and said, V'chain Rabbi Eliezer postel b'kol karbanos kulan. And so we learned in the Gemara, in the Mishnah in Besechas Par, that Rabbi Eliezer prohibits to take an animal from an idolater also for all other karbanos because of the concern of intercourse. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha were sitting on the porch of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, and one of them said, "This," and Rabbi Eliezer disqualifies the whole karbanos kulan, that you're not take an animal ever from an idolater because maybe it was disqualified through intercourse. Pasach idach minayil v'amar mayu sivu echavroy Rabbi Eliezer. So he said, what did the rabbis respond? They said they responded from the prophecy from Isaiah called "Tzon Kedar Yikav Tzulach," meaning to say you're going to accept the animals in the future from the idolaters, and we don't have to be concerned about this. No, don't question me from Isaiah because all the nations of the world will want to convert, and even though you won't accept them, nevertheless they'll be very careful not to have the intercourse with the animals so you can accept their animals. So Rabbi Yosef Maikra, what's the pasuk? How do we know this? And in the future all the nations will want to convert. Because it says in Tefanya, then I will make all the nations turn into a clear tongue, and they will all call on the name of God. All the nations will call on the name of God. Maybe they're only going to stop worshiping idolatry, but they're still going to want to be. But where do we know that they're also going to be not just stopping worshiping idolatry, but they're also going to be careful about intercourse with the animals? Because it says to serve shechem echad, meaning to say that there won't be any distinction between the Jewish people and the nations. All of them will serve equally. Rav Papa learned a different source for this idea, a different story. Rav Papa learned like this, or Rav Zvin learned like this. And both have said, they both said that Rabbi Eliezer disqualified with all the sacrifices. And they both said, how did they answer Rabbi Eliezer? From the pasuk called Tzon Kedar Yikav Tzulach. And Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Kum Greirim Gerurim Heimas. They're all going to convert. Mikra, what's the pasuk? Azapo Chalamim Safid Burul Kulam Shem Hashem. Maska for Rabbi Yosef. So he says, but maybe they just maybe only turned from idolatry, but not from all other sins. So very similar to the previous. Meisvei. So the Gemara challenges this. Doesn't Moshe say that to power you're going to give us all the animals as offerings? So we see from here that indeed they are going to worship with the animals. They're going to accept them as karbanos. Where it says Kodem Matan Torah Shani, that was before the giving of the Torah. They weren't commanded about this. Didn't Yisrael take from Moshe and offerings for sacrifices? Yisrael brought to Moshe animals to bring as a sacrifice. So and wasn't this after Matan Torah? So Gemara says, no, Yisro Nami called the Matan Torah. Yisro was before the giving of the Torah. Well, this is a dispute. This is a dispute whether or not the story of Yisro took place before Matan Torah. But according to one who says it took place after Matan Torah, how would you explain it? So Yisro Zaban. Yisro bought the animals from a Jew. And that's why Moshe accepted them. Tashma, what about another attempt to prove not Rabbi Elazar? Vayomer Shaul me'amaleki heavy asher chamal ha'am al meitav atzon v'abakar. L'man tzboch Hashem lokecha. So Shmuel comes and says to Saul, "Where'd you get all these animals?" He said, "I got them from the Amalekites." And the people had mercy on the best of their sheep to make a sacrifice to God. Umay meitav, the may meitav. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a proof that he took their animals. Because what does it mean he took it from the best of their animals? Meaning to say that they sold them. They sold the value of those animals, and they bought other animals to bring as karbanos. Umay shnam meitav. So what does it matter if it was the best? So we could sell them. Another question on Rabbi Elazar, Tashma. Ayomer Arvana al David. David bought the land for the Beis Hamikdash from our Arvana Yevusi. So Arvana says to David, "Yikach v'yadoni hamelch atov be'inav re'ei abakar lo rav amurigim u'koi abakar lo leitim." Take the best of my animals for your offerings. So he bought the animals from Arvana. Amar Nachman Arvana ger toshafaya. No, Arvana fulfilled the mitzvahs. What does it mean when the pasuk refers to the morigim? My morigim, Amarua mita shal turbil. That this was a bed of turbil. My mita shal turbil. Izai de korkasa de daishan. That this is a board, a wooden board that's wide and thick that has very deep ridges, and you use it to thresh your grain. How do we know this? Because it says in Isaiah, he's made some tichum morek charutz chadash bal pipios tatu sharim mitadok ugvaos kamotz tasik. Mason, the Gemara challenges Rabbi Eliezer from the fact that in the days of Shmuel that the Pushtim came to take the Aron, and after they took it, they were punished from heaven, and they returned it on a wagon. And they took this wagon and said, Paros elu olah Hashem. They took the cows that brought it back and brought it as an offering. How could they do this? It was from the Pushtim. Now, this was some unusual thing because it happened through a miracle. How could they bring a female animal as an olah? My cautious. And maybe they could. Maybe by an individual offering, you're allowed to do it. How do you know you could bring in a female as an offering, even by a private altar? As it says, when they were in Mitzvah and the Philistines came to attack them, Shmuel took one female and he brought it as an offering. It doesn't say in Payim male. It says it was a female. So we see from here that according to the Rabban, the Tosefta, you can buy, is a Rabban's position, you can buy an animal from the idolaters to bring as an offering because the idolaters will not ruin their own animal. So Rabbi Yochanan says, even though the Tosefta says you can buy an animal from an altar for a sacrifice, there are some areas we have to be concerned. So that you can only buy the animal if it's under 3 years, because under 3 years old, the animal becomes sterile if it had intercourse. But above 3 years, it wouldn't. And so therefore, you can't buy the animal if it's above 3 years. So they challenged him with all these questions that they asked him, Rabbi Eliezer, all these psukim. They said they brought the offerings. He said, yeah. And he said that was when it was under 3 years old. But more than 3 years old, they couldn't bring it. So Gemara says another question. Tashma, it says by the Philistine, paros elu olah Hashem, that they brought the paros as an olah. But so he says, that was also under 3 years. When it says about them, they're the children of these oxes that they brought, the Philistine destroyed them in their home. Well, how could they have children? If the animal is less than 3 years old, would it give birth? Mara says, but didn't we learn that if it's a cow or donkey under 3 years old, for sure the offspring goes to the Kohen as the firstborn. From then on, it's a suffix. And the Gemara says, so we go back to the first approach that, according to Rebbe Elazar, that it was a hora show, just a one-time moment. So Tosfos asked the question. It says that prior to 3 years old, it won't give birth. The Gemara asked, "What are you talking about?" Said Tosfos. We see every day that there are cows that are 2 years old that give birth. Tosfos asked this question. The times have changed from what it was in the earlier generations. We didn't say now it's a different type of cow. Our cow today that give birth at 2 is a different type of cow. So since the Gemara mentions the cows that were brought back from the land of the Philistines, and now it goes into a discussion of that. It says, "Vayisharna paros b'derach al derach Beit Shemesh," and the cows went straight back on the path to Beit Shemesh. My vayisharna, Amar B'Yochim Shur Merish Amru Shira. The cows were singing. That the cows turned their faces away from the Aron of Amru Shir, and they sang. My Shir, what did the cows sing? Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shem Rabbi Meir, Azir Shir Moshe Bnei Yisrael. They sang the song of the sea. Rabbi Yochanan Didei Amar V'amartem B'yom Hahu Hodu Hashem Kiru V'Shmo. Reish Lakish says Mizmora Yasma, the psalm of the orphans. Meaning to say that it doesn't say who mentions it. Mizmor Shiru Hashem Shir Chadash Kinefos Asal Shir When Minus Rokacho. The letter says Hashem Malach Yirgazu Amim. Rishon Baruch Moni says Hashem Malach Yisravesh. Rav Yitzchak Nafcha Amar Roni Roni Ashita. Rejoice, rejoice. The ark. Hitnofafi Barov Hadrech Hamachushekes Berikmei Zahav Hamahula B'Dvir Harmon Mufara Ba'adi Adiyim. Rav Ashi masking on Rabbi Yitzchak. He says Rabbi Yitzchak's song was saying about this. Ahav. I even saw Aron Vayomer Shakuma Hashem. Yisrael Mayamar. What were the children saying after Moshe says this song? Rabbi Yitzchak Roni Roni Ashita. So then the Gemara says a lot more, but we'll have to stop here. But I want to say, what a geschmack that the Daf Yomi is talking about the cows singing, and it's on the Shabbos. This is the Daf Yomi, which we'll read tomorrow on Shabbos, which talks about the donkey singing. So the donkey speaking. So we have a donkey speaking and a cow singing, both on the same Shabbos. And obviously, there's a lot more. I did it very quickly. Tomorrow, I'll have a lot more time to do it properly. Shkoyach to everybody, and a good Shabbos.